Okay, everyone, welcome to the Elokus channel. This is class number 10 in the discourse Vayichan Shom Yisroel, which is the third discourse in the great book B'Shasha Ekdimu 5672. Okay, we were holding over here in the exploration in how do we measure up the vessels to the vessels of Atzilus, the vessels of the Sfirot, being that they are already in a state of definition and therefore in a state of an existence. How do we measure them up to the levels of the divine that precede it? We are in general, we're still in a state of pure infinity, which means non-defined and non-specified. So yesterday in the last class, in class number 9, we discussed its association, or its a comparison to the level of Adam Kadmon, where over there we said, in essence, it's not a real Ein Aroch, it's not a real, complete, essential, inconsequential state, because you have to say that in the level of Adam Kadmon, there is already the seeds, so to speak, as he called it, the shoresh, the root of the neshamis, of the soul, of the gufais, of the bodies of the kelim. And as he explained, the reason why it's not seen at all any metzius, any existence over there, all you sense is, all that is sensed in Adam Kadmon is, obviously, if everything is in a state of absolute unity, and it's all contained in one vessel, as we discussed, it must be that they're not expressed into existence. So he said that's not because inherently they're not there, it's just because they are overpowered by the light. When the light of Adam Kadmon, the light of the kav, the light of the ray, that of the thread that shines into the level of Adam Kadmon, since Adam Kadmon is the first level, it is so intense and so bright that you don't notice the subtlety of the vessels. So therefore, the vessels, when they later emerge in Atzilus, they are not considered something really new, and therefore not inconsequential. They're a continuation of these vessels. They are a further development of the vessels. Even though on the level of appearance, they seem like they're something new. However, now he continues. And we can say the same. However, the last words he said, we're starting now the next parentheses in Perek Yud. However, he said, the last point we learned, that compared to the Or Ein Sof itself, that's before Atzilus, for sure, it's completely, the vessels of Atzilus are completely Ein Aroch and inconsequential. And even to the light of the Or Ein Sof that flows through the Kav and enters into the Kalim, into the vessels, becoming their soul, becoming their spirit, becoming the Or that's vested in the vessels, since these Oiros of Atzilus are a continuation of the Kav, which the Kav is plugged in and a revelation of the Or Ein Sof, it's considered Ein Sof, undefined, unlimited, and the vessels are completely nothing compared to them. That's the idea. Now we can say the Kamoike. Now he's going to say that the same. So what we did now is a contrast between the Kalim, and we went all the way up to the Or Ein Sof. But how about to the power of limitation that's in the Or Ein Sof? That's what we said, the koyach hagvul, the power to limit himself that's in the Or Ein Sof. So as we discussed yesterday, it will depend if this power of limitation is already in a separated state from the infinite, meaning it's more, the infinite has concealed itself and all that is left is God's limiting power. It's more pronounced. Or if the limiting power of Hashem is still contained within the limitless power. So he says over here, Yesh Loimar, and therefore we can say the Kamoikain, and the same is true. What do you mean the same? The same nothingness of the Kalim, the same inconsequentialness of the Kalim, the same insignificance of the vessels, in which we say they are completely insignificant. It's not only to the Ein Sof of the Ein Sof, the infinite of the infinite, it's also to the power of limitation that's in the infinite. When it is still, as we discussed earlier, in stage B, meaning before it lowers itself down to stage C, while it is still in stage B, which means while it is still in as part, the power of Gavul is still one and the same with the power of Bali Gavul. the power of limitlessness, then it's really limitless. Why? Because lifnei tzimtzum, before the tzimtzum, eino shayach inyan hametzias klal. Anything that's before the tzimtzum is in a state of non-existence. Non-existence meaning, when we say something is over here on this level, when we say non-existence, we mean not limited to an existence. It's an energy that's pre-existing, an existence, which means a definable existence. It's just a pure, undefined, boundless potential. So therefore, it's einer shayach ein hametzias klal. It's not possible to speak of a specified, defined something, in which we would be able to compare this something to that something. See, when something is already a something, you can say this is a bigger something, this is a smaller something. There's what to compare, apples to apples. But you can't compare anything, because when you have something and you're comparing it to pre-somethingness, there's no comparison. That's the meaning of ein aroch. So since before the tzimtzum it's pre-something, there's no even the power of a limitation in this stage is not a specified, definable power. Why? It's not possible to even talk about any metzias, any somethingness. In any way, let it be in any way, meaning in the most subtlest of way. Like we said in that very same drush. Which drush? This is the Yom Tov Shel Rosh Hashanah drush, the Maamor that we mentioned yesterday, from the first hemshech, from the first long discourse from 1906, Samach Vav. So over there he explains, being an oisias chakika, regarding the letters in Chassidus, it gives a metaphor for the power of Hashem, the self-limiting power that the Ein Sof contains, that the infinite being contains. So in order to show us how one it is with the Ein Sof, God is not a composite of more than one entity. So he's not made up of a power of limitlessness and a power of limitation. But yet we want to express that even while he is limitless, he still has within that limitlessness, he still has the power to limit. So it's there, but it's not there. So we use an interesting metaphor. What's the metaphor? We use oisias hakika. We use the concept of engraved letters. Now let's first take a look at that. That's before the tzimtzum. Before the tzimtzum, when there are letters meaning any form of something. What's a letter? A letter is a design, a specified design. When you're sitting down on a book and you grab a book in the library, you want to read something. You want to take information. Now, if there was no cover and the library and this book is sitting in the undefined section of the library, it's not literature, it's not history, it's not I don't know, whatever science. It's not medicine, it's not biology, it's the undefined. So you're pulling out the book and you don't know anything, and there's no name on the book. It's a plain folder with and then you open up and all you see is white pages. So what's that? Then you're still in the state of nothingness, right? Once you find letters and words, what are letters and words immediately? Immediately the letters and words confine and bring you a particularization. So the concept of letters is particularization. And therefore, in the Or Ein Sof is the white simple book. It's the potential for everything, but nothing is there yet. But yet, on the other hand, we want to say that there's the potential for letters, for words, for definable emergences to emerge. But we want to explain that on this level, it's not like it contains something particular. So what is it? So we use the concept of letters, but what kind of letters? Engraved letters. Meaning to say, in letters, words, there are two types of ways in which we can read words. There are words that are written with ink on a paper or printed onto a paper, or parchment, a paper, whatever it is. And then there is an engraving, where the words and the letters are engraved in the substance in which they are like a seal that doesn't add any ink. It just is a seal. It carves itself out, so to speak, into the parchment, into the paper. And then it creates like the raised letters or the indented letters or whatever that is. So over here, or in a stone, you can have like we'll see in the tablets, in the luchos, in the holy tablets, the letters were engraved. What does that mean? What's the difference? When you have engraved letters, you have nothing else but the thing that's holding the letters. So the letter, which is design and definition, is one with the predefined substance. But when the letters are written, that means that the letters are already something else. It's a superimposed something, and the letter is already a part. The letter is something other than the parchment. That's the difference. And that's the parchment is holding the letters. So when we're referring that to the divine, so we're saying like this. At a certain point, when the definitions, the creations, for instance, are for sure written letters. The creation are already something. God created something. And the thing is already something. And we said it earlier, like in the earlier classes, the creations are not only a something, they're a somebody too. They have a sense of beingness apart from God. But even if you go higher and you speak about the attributes of Atzilus, which are divine powers, it's not a somebody, but it's still a something, which means the energy of God has particularized itself to be kindness or to be compassion, right? So it has a nature, and therefore it's not the Ein Sof. Obviously, the Ein Sof produced it, but when it is now, it's no more Ein Sof. It's no more limitless. It is now confined to its identity. So it's like a separate. It and the Ein Sof are two things. The Ein Sof carries it, just like the parchment carries the words. It's laid onto it. It even produced it. Imagine a parchment that would write with self-write upon it. It would write upon itself the letters. And like God, so to speak, writes upon himself those letters. But their letters are already something. Engraved letters means that the letters, which means the shapes and the forms or whatever it is still one with the Ein Sof. And that can only mean when it's not yet a thing. Because once it's a thing, the thinginess of it limits it. It's not Ein Sof. So for it to be part of the Ein Sof is when it's not a thing yet. So when is that? Before the tzimtzum, before the contraction. All the potential things that the Or can create, the self-limiting abilities of the Or Ein Sof to create the letters are really, as we spoke earlier, completely one with the Ein Sof. It's not like the Ein Sof has within himself another power, a limiting power. The Ein Sof has a particular power inside of it, but rather the Ein Sof is Ein Sof. And if it's Ein Sof, you cannot confine it and you can't define it. And part of its non-definition is that it could be whatever it wants. It can limit itself. It could contract itself. So therefore, the letters, the engraved letters, impress this idea that there is no Metzias yet. There's no existence yet. Although we want to also say that there is letters, which means the potential to produce anything and to limit into anything. Now, there is an extra emphasis in the discourse over here. Not only were they engraved, but they were engraved in the luchos. And he says that the letters before the tzimtzum are like the letters of the luchot. Actually, the letters of the luchos of the Torah on this level is actually coming from before the tzimtzum. That's why it was engraved letters, showing to us where we're pulling from, where the Torah was coming from the level from letters within God while they're still engraved in Him. Fine. But the emphasis over there is just like the luchos, the letters were engraved through and through, which means that it went from one side of the stone to the other end of the stone. It was completely, I don't know what you would use the word in English. I forgot right now. It penetrated across the entire width and thickness of the stone, as opposed to sometimes you have engravings, like you'll see a engraving on a tombstone or on a headstone or something like that. The engravement is an engravement. The letters are pulled in, but still there is some stone beneath the letter. And what's the difference? When there is a stone beneath the letter, what that means really is is that although what you can see over here is like this, then you'll have two parts to the stone. You have one part to the stone where there is no letters, and then over there the stone is, let's say, a little taller, a little thicker. Let's say it's a 5-inch a stone. Okay, so the thickness of the stone is 5 inches. But then in the place where the letters are engraved, the stone is only 4.5 inches, which because the engravement is a half an inch. So in a sense, it would be, then you can differentiate and say that in the stone itself, there's two parts to the stone. There is the stone that is 5 inches, and then there is a stone, the part of the stone where the stone is less. So here you're already making a differentiation. It's almost like seeing two powers in the stone. And when we apply that to God, it would be something like this. There is the koach, there is the Ein Sof. There is the non-limitation, the limitlessness of God. And then within the limitlessness of God, there is also a God's power to limit. And God's power to limit would be then a power that's within him, in which you can kind of already say that power is not as it's a lesser part of God. It's a lesser energy. There is a higher, undefinable, limitless energy, and then there is a finite, a limited energy in God. Two energies that live side by side. But if the letters are engraved through and through, what does that mean? That all you have is the same stone, the stone of the 5 inches. Yes, you have a hollow over here. But the emphasis over here is that the space that the image that's created, the design that's there, its substance, the substance of the design is the hollow, but the substance that's holding that hollow, that's making the design, is the very same walls of the limitlessness of the stone. Imagine, it's the very same stone without any change in the stone. The stone itself, the design is of the stone itself. What would that mean? That means that in the Or Ein Sof, all you have is Or Ein Sof. Or Ein Sof, which means the limitlessness of God's light. And the very power to limit himself that's in the limitlessness is the very same limitlessness. It's not two things. It's his limitlessness, which enables him to limit. So it's a design that is being held up by the very same limitlessness of God. Which means there's no mitzias here. There's nothing that you can identify and say it is the power of limitation. The limited koyach, the koyach hagvul, is nothing other than the bli gvul. If so, the koyach hagvul is also really bli gvul. It's really limitless. And if it's limitless, it has no connection at all to a limited power that eventually will be. And for that reason, this is where he's proving that the koach hagvul, while it's still in the level of bli gvul, while it's still in the Or Ein Sof before the tzimtzum, to it, the kelim of Atzilus that are specified powers are ein aroch. They are completely a new entity. There is no connection because he is truly bli gvul, he is truly limitless, and they are limited. That's the idea. Deep idea, something that you can ponder for quite a while. And I'll leave the pondering for you. The Hainu, and I should ponder it too, longer. When it explains the letters of Chakika, of engraved letters. The Lifnei HaTzimtzum, that's before the Tzimtzum, it's like an engravement, me'ever le'ever, thorough and thorough, from one side of the stone to the other. That was in the first luchas. There's no existence to the oisias. Meaning the letters themselves, and there's another, maybe I didn't even emphasize this. The letters themselves don't even have an existence. You see, that's when you engrave letters and this stone on then the letters have substance. What's the substance? The floor of the letters, that's the substance. The stone part of the letters is the stone. As I'm saying, it's less, but it's what that really means. The letters have an existence. But if it's through and through, it's hollow, meaning there's nothing there. And therefore, the vessels that later happened in Atzilus, that they are b'bchenas metzias, that they're in a state of something. Hareyim be'ein aroich, they are considered nothing. Legabe madrega zu, to this madrega, to this level, gam be'etzem mihusam, which means even in their essence. In other words, even though we say they're a lakus, and we said earlier that the differences between levels of a lakus are not ein aroch, they're not completely separated. But over here we can argue and say that they are. Why? Because this is, here we're talking about beligvul, limitlessness, and here we're jumping, we're making a complete radical quantum leap into limitation. But this is all if we're comparing it to the koyach hagvul, to the power of the gvul, when the beligvul light is still shining, which means when the stone that's around the letters is still present. But once the rishimu takes place, and suddenly it's almost like the stone disappears and all you have is floating letters. That's already after the tzimtzum. Over here, you're sensing and feeling and experiencing far more a limiting power. And you're not seeing the limiting power as another facet of the limitlessness. All you see is a power that can do the finite, whatever that is. So then, so even though you don't have yet the specifications, you don't even know which limitation is going to come. If he's going to design red, or if he's going to design green or blue, if he's going to design chesed, gevurah, teferes, or whatever, you don't know. That's fine. So it's still beyond the real metzius of the spheres, but there is already a somethingness. The kelim are not ein aroch in their essence. They are still ein aroch in the manner in which they come about. Because the way they came about, as remember we said, is not through communication. They come about through non-communication. The power, the koyach hagvul, is an anonymous power that affects things far away, not in a way that they're operating in a direct connection to where they're operating. The koyach hagvul, that's the point. It's nefilas ha'osiyos. Remember we learned earlier, it's like the letters fall. It's in a way that the shoresh, the root of it does not reveal itself in what it's doing. And you should look what it says elsewhere. Now, with that, he concluded this whole discussion. So we will differentiate. So we discussed already how they are to the levels of Ak. Remember, we said we're going to compare it to 4 levels. How the Kelim of Atzilus are to Adam Kadmon, and to the lower level of the Oisius Rishimu, when they are already in a state of limitation, power of Koyach HaGvul. And then we learned today how it is compared to the Koyach HaGvul when it's still engraved letters in the Or Ein Sof, through and through. So over there, it's really Ein Aroch, no comparison. And then, of course, to higher, to the Or Ein Sof itself, for sure it's Ein Aroch. And I don't know if he means over here, look what he says over here, if he means really a 5th level. I'm not sure. Or he's referring to the 4th level. And you should look where it says elsewhere, Damitis inyan ein aroch, the real true element when we say ein aroch, hu lecha dafka, is to you yourself. We say ein aroch lecha, to you. Legaba atzmus ein sof, to the essence of the ein sof. Maybe that's even deeper. We're talking about the essence of the Ein Sof, not the Or Ein Sof, not the light. The light is a revelation of the Ein Sof. But the essence of the Ein Sof, that's where the real Ein Aroch is. But he doesn't explain. So we are going to leave that unexplained. Meaning he doesn't give the why that is Amitas Inyan, why that's the truth of Ein Aroch. Okay, so now we learned that before the whole parentheses began, we were saying that remember we were talking that the spheres are like a spark, which means in essence they're the same substance of God. They are of the substance of Hashem. They're not a somebody. There might be a something, but it's still Hashem himself transporting himself into the somethingness. Makol Mokum. So on that is where he goes back with these words, Makol Mokum. Nevertheless, notwithstanding the fact that he elevated the Kalim and made them so great by being considered Elokus, they're considered divine, Makol Mokum. Nevertheless, Hareyu Gam came b'bchinas yesh meyayin. At the same time, they are still considered something from nothing, which means completely removed from the Or Ein Sof, mipnei shehem b'chinas gevul, because they are in a level, in a state of gevul, of limitation. She'ein aroich, that is not compared lagaba Or Ein Sof habli gevul, to the Or Ein Sof that is limitless, and really all levels higher than the Kalim of Atzilus, even Adam Kadmon, even the Kalim and the Adam Kadmon, in essence, we said are believable. It's all limitless. Why? Good. In Adam Kadmon, we said it's not so much because of the Kalim, it's because of the light. But bottom line, you don't see any Gevul. Once you go above the roof of Atzilus, once you go higher than Atzilus, into a deeper dimension than Atzilus, all you encounter is believable, the infinity of God, on all levels. And therefore, these Kalim are considered yesh me'ayin, something from nothing. V'esavusan, and they're coming into being, who b'derech ein aroch, is in a manner of ein aroch, inconsequential, and so forth. And not only is it ein aroch, but he's going to explain that it's so ein aroch, but let's leave that for tomorrow. And that will complete tomorrow's class. Be'ezras Hashem, tomorrow or Sunday, we're going to complete chapter 10, Be'ezras Hashem, and do the Kitzer, and move into chapter 11, Be'ezras Hashem, which is the last chapter of this discourse. Meanwhile, let us see Mashiach today.